In this video, we will go through who pays what closing cost customarily, and it's broken up county by county as it varies greatly throughout the state. And we'll see how this corresponds to the purchase agreement. Here I'm in the allocation of costs section on page 3 of 16. Now agents will ask when I do my purchase agreement tutorials where they can get a copy of this, and I will put a link in the description. You can go up, click on show more, find the link, download a PDF for your own personal use. So let's go through this quickly and see how it corresponds to the customary fee chart. Now we start with the NHD. And the NHD is an obligation between the seller and the state, so it should always be provided. The seller should pay. And I always check environmental because it doesn't cost much more, but it does offer more data. And then you put the company that you're interested in. Now this next line, Q2, this is built around this new optional wildfire disclosure if you're interested in it. I have a whole video on it you can find in the channel videos. If you do a search, you'll see the wildfire video. And the seller typically pays for that, and you could even put by seller's choice, but it's optional. It's up to you. Now I have property inspection here from using this as sample for some other video. I'm not sure why. I don't typically even put property inspection in here, but of course the buyer's paying for their property inspection or any specialized inspection. But let's get down to the stuff that corresponds more to this chart. First, let's look at smoke alarm, CO2 detectors, and water heater bracing. Now the seller should pay for this. I've heard of instances where the buyer is willing to, but really no home should transfer without all of this being in compliance. And that's really the seller's responsibility, because the seller is warranting that this is in compliance with civil code. And should a buyer really be in a seller's home before they own it, standing on a ladder, screwing in a smoke alarm? Should the seller take on that liability? Should the buyer take on the burden of doing that? It just doesn't make sense. Okay, now here is a area of contention. And when I do this, when I bring this up in videos, there's always someone that has another opinion they want to bring up, and this is there are mixed feelings when it comes to this. Okay, this is important here. Q5, point of sale inspections and or reports, because some cities require a report and or an inspection of a property, and it's a requirement. When it says point of sale, it means if you're an escrow, before you close escrow, this is required. Who pays for that? Now I say the seller pays for that, and you should know. If you're an agent writing an offer, you should know whether or not your city requires this, and the seller should pay. That's my personal opinion. Of course, who pays can be negotiated, but this shouldn't be left blank. That's my personal opinion. Now, this next line is even more contentious, because this doesn't just say, hey, if there's a report or inspection, someone's got to pay for it. And this goes a step further and says, let's say there's an inspection, because these inspections are really just for the city to come out and see if everything's up to code. And if it's not, then they're likely going to issue some sort of citation or corrective action that they're going to require from the owner. Now down here though, this is where it's assigning who's paying for this corrective or remedial action. Now, I've put seller in the past because most buyers are going to say, hey, don't sell me a defective product. If you have something that's not up to code and the city's on your tail about it, then you should pay for it. I'm not trying to buy something that's a problem. Of course, investors might be, and that's a different story, because an investor would probably just check the box buyer. But here, every time I say the seller should pay in an example, just an example, someone, of course, says that no, this should be blank or countered out because the seller doesn't know what they're agreeing to. And I actually agree with that. I agree with that because that's why they changed who pays for termite work. Years ago, they changed that because sellers were agreeing in the purchase agreement who pays for Section 1 clearance and termite, and sellers were signing a blank check. Because in theory, if you check the box seller and it turns out it's $30,000 or $50,000 to correct whatever's wrong, whatever was discovered in the inspection, the seller's going to say, wait, I didn't expect to pay $30,000 or $50,000. I don't even have that. So it creates a problem. So if that's a potential issue, leave this blank. Leave this blank down here. I'm just giving you a little bit of context to make your own decision. But this is an area of contention, and I think there are multiple approaches depending on the clients and the property and the expectation. You're going to be writing offers differently if it's an investor or if it's a first-time home buyer. So I can't please everyone when I just give an example, like I checking seller here, and of course it freaks people out. But I don't disagree with the criticism that I hear of people saying that this should be left blank or counted out. I agree with that. I get it. Believe me, I've seen a zillion transactions. I've seen it all. Okay, escrow fee. Okay, now here's where it corresponds to customary title fees. Now keep in mind, in Southern California, both parties split the escrow fee. Well, it used to be that we would write, well, this form has changed over the years, but it used to be split 50-50, or agents would write 50-50. Then several years ago, agents started to write each pay their own. And then that actually got adopted with this boilerplate text now. You can check the box, each pay their own, which is the same as writing 50-50. It gets treated the same by the escrow company. Now you can see here in this first column, escrow fees. You can see now the majority of the state splits it 50-50, which is each pay their own, same thing. But you'll see that in Northern California, there are variations, like Sonoma County, buyer pays, Solana County. And you know, Northern California, that's where it varies county to county significantly. Southern, and I would say Southern would be south of Santa Cruz County, south of Merced County, and then around Monterey, that's where it starts to become more like Southern California. And then south of there, from like San Luis Obispo County down south, both parties split it, and both parties do the same thing with title, meaning that the seller pays. I'll get to title in a second, but Southern California and most of Northern California, escrows split 50-50 or each pay their own. And if you're in a different county, and you'll see some counties actually within the county, like Monterey County. Do you see that? There are variations. I think Yolo County does it too. Yeah, I mean, well, in this case, it's the same for the escrow fee. But some counties, it's just depending on if there's a north and south or where you are in the county, there's a difference customarily. So, but you'll see Southern California and most of the state each pay their own, or you could write both. I mean, it's effectively the same thing. Now, title insurance. Now, I should mention that in Southern California, title and escrow are often split. In Northern California, escrow is usually done under the same roof as title. So we go down here, owner's title policy, Southern California, seller. Seller pays the owner's title policy. And then we jump over here and we see that for title, you have, look at all these places, Alameda County, buyer pays. All right, you see all these places, or it's split. Humboldt County, split. Buyer pays in Marin County. I mean, this is not something you see in Southern California. So this is why this sheet comes in very handy. All right, jumping back here. Now, buyer's title insurance, that is a cost taken on by the borrower in a mortgage scenario. And because lender's title insurance pertains to the borrower's lender and really has nothing to do with the parties negotiating this other stuff, it automatically says buyer. So don't even worry about this line. Q9, don't even worry about this. That's why it's already written in buyer by default on the RPA. Now, county transfer tax. This and city transfer tax both come up on this sheet. Now, county transfer tax, most places throughout the state, the seller pays. In Southern California, the seller pays universally. But you'll see like Humboldt County, for example, 50-50. We'll scroll down here. Seller pays. In most other places, what is this? Amador County, 50-50. So most places, the seller pays. And then city. Now, most cities don't charge a transfer tax. Some do. If you're writing an offer, you should know whether or not the city does. Now, of course, you could put seller here, and then if it's not applicable, then it's a moot. This has no effect. It's inconsequential at that point. But if you want to double check, you have a nice column just for city transfer tax, and you'll see that like some places the parties split it 50-50. The seller pays. Well, Southern California, the seller pays all this stuff. Northern California, look at they show all these places. Like, so in Alameda County, 50-50. So this is pretty helpful. Sacramento, 50-50. San Mateo, 50-50. And it even tells you how much. These numbers are probably outdated, though. I'm sure that it may have gone up in some places. If you find that some of this is dated, let me know. All right, let's jump back over here. HOA, now they've made it easy. CAR has made it easy by putting the parties already in here. So for HOA fee for prepping disclosures, seller, this is already filled in. What about transfer fees? Just put seller. Have the seller pay. Simple. Private transfer fee. Very rarely do you see this on a transaction. This is usually if you're in a certain community that has some sort of transfer fee that is built into the neighborhood or for amenities, or if there's some other, I've seen transfer fees built into the title report. But this is rare, but you'll know if there's a transfer fee involved. Now, because this is rare, they just leave it seller. And then you can modify it by putting if checked. But I say just leave line Q15 alone. And if there's anything else here, of course, that wasn't explicitly mentioned, just write it in. Home warranty, seller typically pays, issued by, just write buyer's choice, since the buyer's the one that's going to have to call the customer service line and deal with that headache if their water heater goes out. Have the buyer choose. Okay, that's it. This form will be available for you to download in the description. Thank you for watching.